This will sound very strange, but the righteous Christian God of the Bible has used the greatest aviation mystery in history, the mysterious disappearance of Amelia Earhart in 1937 in a plane crash, as she attempted to become the first woman to fly around the world, to point to the predicted death of the first woman vice president in a plane crash on May 19th, 2024. It is also predicted that the first woman president, Michelle Obama, will replace Kamala Harris and become the 47th president on June 7th, 2024. Kamala Harris is the first acting U.S. vice president, and Michelle Obama will become the first female president, and this is one reason for the connection to the Amelia Earhart story and her attempt to become the first woman to travel solo, fly a plane around the world. This and many more truly amazing and profound things will be explained in this important video. The date that this video is posted proves that this prediction is being made ahead of time, as does this time-stamped email and forensic notes PDF document. If you are skeptical for some reason, please email me and I will forward these to you. As can be seen in this email, the prediction that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash has been known since at least August 5th, 2021. If you have already watched this essential introductory information, you can skip ahead 28 minutes. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is only being explained on this channel. The full intended meaning of God's prophetic signs cannot be properly understood without their context and connections to other prophetic signs. God's big picture of signs is an interconnected web. It is through these connections between related prophetic signs that God is telling very important stories that are revealing very important knowledge. For example, it is through God's big picture of signs, patterns, and connections that He is revealing the way in which Barack Obama will become the president again, which is through the death of Vice President Kamala Harris in a plane crash. For many years, God has been painting this particular picture through His prophetic signs, and along the way He has been developing numerous trails of connected signs that are leading to the precise date that Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash. Here is a diagram that illustrates one such example among countless examples. As we can see here, God has demonstrated a number of trails of signs that led to August 24th, 2023. It was known ahead of time that there would be a prophetic sign related to the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash on August 24th, and then on this day, Vladimir Putin was the first public official to confirm that the Russian general and leader of the Wagner Group that attempted a coup of Vladimir Putin died in a plane crash, which hints at the soft coup that has been unfolding in America in recent years. In retrospect, it could have been easily predicted that the Russian general of the Wagner Group would die in a plane crash on August 24th, because it was known that August 24th is 54 days before October 17th, which was another date God was pointing to ahead of time. This is why on August 24th, Trump, God's trumpet, had in 5 months been arrested for the 4th time in the 4th state. It also hinted at the number 54. God has been using in His signs the theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment to fight in the Civil War, who were known for fighting valiantly at Fort Wagner. As we can see in this diagram, the trail of signs continues on from August 24th to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 24th. This is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works. And this theme of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment is an example of a story that God is telling that is extremely important. Actually, February 24th ended up being another step in the trail of signs that is leading to May 19th. The date 224 hints at 2 times 24 and hints at G 2424 in Strong's Greek Bible Concordance, which is the Greek word for the name Jesus. Greek letters are also numbers, and the numeric value of the name Jesus in Greek is equal to 888. The number 24 is 8 plus 8 plus 8. The other prophetic signs on February 24th also revealed the number 8. This includes the S&P 500 stock market index's close for the weekend at 5,088.80, and the Boston Celtics basketball team's 8th win in a row, giving them an 8-game lead over the next team, and the dangerous basketball court storming incident after the 8th ranked Blue Devils college basketball team lost to the Deacon Demons in an upset. Also on February 24th, Trump won the primary for the 8th state to join the Union when he beat the former governor of the 8th state. Trump campaigned in the capital of the 8th state on the day of Harris's 3rd visit to the 8th state this year, which hinted at 3 8s and 888. The name Trump in Simple English Gematria is equal to 88. Donald J. Trump in English Gematria is equal to 888. The S&P 500 stock market index close at 5,088.80 on February 24th hinted at adding 5 times 8 days from February 24th to reach April 4th. As well, one of the many trails of signs that led to February 24th, when the S&P 500 was closed at 5,088.80, was the 13 days connection from Super Bowl 58, in which Taylor Swift, who is known for being obsessed with the number 13, attended her 13th Chiefs game this season. Super Bowl 58 hints at 5 plus 8 equals 13, and also hints at the addition of 5 times 8 days to February 24th, which was 13 days after Super Bowl 58. 5 times 8 days after the stock market was closed at 5,088.80 points was the date 4/4, April 4th. The Antichrist is the 44th president, and also the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 in high school. It is predicted that the 44th president will become the president again after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, and the date 4/4 in 2024 was exactly 2 times 3 years after the crash of the Thunderbirds jet that was number 4 in its squad on the date 4/4 in 2018. Thunderbirds jets are F-16s, which hints at 4 times 4. This Thunderbirds jet crashed in the 36th state, and the number 36 hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, as 36 hints at 3 6s, and also it is 6 times 6, and 2 times 18, which is 6 plus 6 plus 6, and the 36th triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 36th row is 666, and 1 plus 2 plus 3 plus 4 all the way up to 36 equals 666. Alaska is the 49th state to join the Union. The 49th vice president is predicted to die in a plane crash, which will lead to the return of the 44th president to the White House, and on the date 4/4, Alaska Airlines announced that it had received $4 times $4 million from Boeing for the door that blew out of its plane in January. This announcement regarding $4 times $4 million on the date 4/4 was exactly 4 times 4 days before 2 Japanese military helicopters collided and crashed. In God's signs, helicopter blades are symbolic of the letter X, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist that is described in Bible prophecy. An X helicopter blade hints at 4 points, and 2 helicopter blades hints at 4 and 4. The 2 helicopters and their blades that hinted at 4 and 4 crashed 4 times 4 days after the date 4/4 and the announcement regarding 4 times $4 million. The reason why God is using Japan in his signs is that the land of the rising sun, with a sun on its flag, is symbolism for the coming catastrophic solar flare that will knock out America's power grid, and Japan is symbolism for nuclear bombs, and Japanese anime is symbolism for the coming mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist. Harris is predicted to crash in her plane in St. Louis, near where the 2 eclipses engendered an X over the nation, and this is predicted to be 29 days after the 2 helicopters crashed. The number 29 is God's way of hinting at 9/11 using only 2 numbers, as the number 2 hints at 1 and 1. On 9/11 in 2001, planes that were on their way to Los Angeles, California, were hijacked and then crashed. Harris is predicted to crash in her plane that will be homeward bound to her $5 million mansion in Brentwood, California, 38 days after the news broke of the death of O.J. Simpson. Simpson was known for the slow-speed car chase that he led homeward bound on the I-5 highway to his mansion in Brentwood, California. News coverage of the chase up the I-5 interrupted the live broadcast of Game 5 of the 1994 NBA Finals, which was exactly 7 plus 7 times 7 months after the live broadcast of Game 3 of the 1989 World Series in San Francisco was interrupted by an earthquake that caused a section of the I-80 Bay Bridge to collapse between Oakland and San Francisco. In the Bible, the Israelites enacted a symbolic 7 plus 7 times 7 before the walls of security of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment due to an earthquake. The earthquake during Game 3 that broke the I-80 bridge hinted at 3 8s and 888, which hints at the name Jesus. And a bridge is symbolic of the connection between man and God, which is Jesus. A broken bridge is symbolic of the broken connection between man and God. Harris and O.J. Simpson are both from San Francisco, and this is why it is predicted that Harris will die 38 days, which hints at 3 8s, after news broke of the death of O.J. Simpson. The Simpson car chase began after the warrant for his arrest was issued at 11 a.m., and it ended at 9 p.m. in front of his home. The chase that began after the arrest warrant for murder at 11 a.m. and ended at 9 p.m. was 2,643 days before 9/11, because G 2,643 in Strong's Greek Bible Concordance is the word that means reconciliation. Through the 9/11 events, God warned America to reconcile with him for its sin and its murder of unborn babies. Harris is the advocate for the murder of unborn babies. She is predicted to die in a plane crash in the city with the area code 314, 38 days after the death of O.J. Simpson on April 11, 2024. April 11th, 2024 was exactly 22 years and 7 months after 9/11 in 2001, and 22 divided by 7 is shorthand for pi, which is 3.14, which hints at the area code 314. 22 years and 7 months is also exactly 271 months, and 271 is the 58th prime number. Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash on May 19th, 2024, 85 days after the S&P 500 stock index was closed at 5,088.80 points, which hinted at the number 58. The number 58 hints at the number 85, which is why Harris will die 85 days after the stock market hinted at the number 58. The reason why God is pointing to the death of Kamala Harris with the number 85 is that she will be replaced by Michelle Obama, who will appoint Barack Obama, and Barack Obama first moved to Chicago in 85 after the May 19th Communist Organization was disbanded in 85. This is the reason why Obama hosted the 85 Chicago Bears, as in the 1985 Chicago Bears, at the White House on the Day of Atonement in the Hebrew calendar, exactly 13 years before the Antichrist Obama will be defeated at the Lord's second coming on the Day of Atonement in 2024. The Antichrist is described in the 13th chapter of the book of Revelation, and 8 plus 5 equals 13. The 85 Chicago Bears lost only one game in their season, and that was in week 13 of the season. The loss was because of Miami Dolphins quarterback number 13. 13 years before the 85 Chicago Bears, the Miami Dolphins became the only team to achieve an undefeated season. Dolphins player number 13 was the Super Bowl MVP that year. In the Bible, 30 years is symbolic of a king. Obama is well known for being a fan of Chicago sports teams. The 85 Chicago Bears Super Bowl win in January of 1986 began a 30-year cycle in which all of the major sports teams from Chicago won their league's championship. This included the Chicago Blackhawks, the Chicago White Sox, and Chicago Cubs, all of which ended severe droughts of championship wins and ended supposed sports curses, which hinted at the curse of the Antichrist. And all three of these sports teams visited the Antichrist while he was in the White House. The 30-year pattern was fulfilled 4 days before the 44th president's last day in the White House, when he was presented with jersey number 44 by star player number 44 of the 2016 Chicago Cubs. And 16 equals 4 times 4. Also, the Kansas City Royals have only been crowned kings of baseball twice, and their 2 World Series wins were exactly 30 years apart. Their first win was in 85. The plot of the movie Back to the Future took place in 85, and 30 years later in the future, in 2015, and the movie included a joke about the Chicago Cubs winning the World Series, which they finally did win the year after the Royals won in 2015, exactly 30 years after their first win in 85. All of this served to point to the year that the Antichrist king, Obama, moved to Chicago in 85 after the May 19th Communist Organization was disbanded in 85. The truth is that Obama was a full-fledged member of the May 19th Communist Organization, which originated in Bill Ayers' Weather Underground organization. And the truth is that Obama got his start in politics with the help of Bill Ayers for the sole purpose and ambition of subverting the American system in a clandestine communist-style revolution. The May 19th Communist Organization was named after the birth dates of Ho Chi Minh, the leader of Vietnam, and Malcolm X. In God's signs, the number 9 is the most important number, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment. Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash on May 19th, near where the eclipses engendered an X over the nation, exactly 99 years after the birth of Malcolm X on the date May 19th. God uses the number 188 in his signs as H188 in the Hebrew Concordance is the word that means woe! It is used in the Bible in the context of extreme judgment from God. 99 years is the equivalent of exactly 1,188 months, which hints at H188, woe! The reason why Harris will die at the X engendered by the eclipses, 1,188 months after the birth of Malcolm X, is for God to prove who the real Barack Obama is. Those who have fallen for the lies of Obama and the political left are on their way to hell, and they need to repent immediately. The planes crashed on 9/11 in Lower Manhattan before the New York Stock Exchange in Lower Manhattan opened. On the morning of Tuesday, 9/11 in 2001, the Dow was closed at 9,605 from the end of the trading day on Monday, 9/10 in 2001. 9,605 hinted at 9 and 6 plus 5 equals 11, and therefore hinted at 9/11. It was closed at precisely 9,605.51. This was 0.34 points before its close on the prior trading day on Friday, 9/7 in 2001. The 0.34 points difference hints at 2 times 17, and the two planes that struck the two towers 17 minutes apart. On 9/10 and 9/11, the Dow was closed at 9,605.51, 0.34 points below its close on 9/7 at 9,605.85. God did this to point to 0.51 and 0.85 in order to communicate that the Antichrist would be the 51st vice president, who was a member of the May 19th Communist Organization that disbanded in 85. God also did this to point to how the Antichrist would be appointed the 51st vice president through using the 25th Amendment, which is what the date 9/7 hints at, as 97 is the 25th prime number. Exactly 4 plus 4 years, which hints at the 44th president. After the Dow closed at 9,605.51 on 9/11 in 2001, the Dow closed at 9,605.41 on 9/11 in 2009, in the year the 44th president was inaugurated. This difference of 0.10 points hints at 5 plus 5 and hints at the I-55 highway that connects Chicago to Cairo, Illinois, and the area of the country that is nicknamed Little Egypt, where the two paths of the eclipses crossed over each other, which is near where Kamala Harris is predicted to crash on the 99th birthday of Malcolm X. The Dow closed at 9,605.41 on 9/11 in 2009, exactly 99 days after Obama went down to Cairo, Egypt, to deliver a speech to the Muslim world and to tell them that America is no longer a Christian nation. A chapter in the book of Isaiah describes the Antichrist, and it begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." This 99 days after Obama went down to Egypt to speak to the Muslim world hints at the 99th anniversary of Malcolm X, a militant leader in the Nation of Islam movement that has ties to the communist movement and the May 19th Communist Organization. An X is symbolic of the mark that the Antichrist will compel people to take. 51 points, and the 51st vice president hints at 51 equals 3 times 17. G317 in Strong's Bible Concordance is the word that means unwillingly, by way of compulsion, by force. On 9/7 in 2001, the Dow was closed at 9,605.85 points, and then on 9/10 and 9/11, it was closed at 9,605.51 points. 4 plus 4 years later, in the first year of the 44th presidency, on 9/11 in 2009, the Dow was closed at 9,605.41 points. The difference between 9,605.85 points and 9,605.41 points is 0.44 points, which identifies the 44th president. Another reason why it is predicted that Kamala Harris will crash near the I-55 and near the X of the eclipses that is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist on the 99th birthday of Malcolm X is that God will be warning of the coming mass demonic possession of those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist that is alluded to in the 9th chapter of the book of Revelation that will be triggered by 5G frequencies. There are about 50 videos related to Harris's predicted crash on this channel that predict that her plane crash will be on February 10th, 2024. Each of these videos tell a different and very important story that everyone needs to know, and these stories are developed through trails of connected signs that led to February 10th, 2024. In other words, the signs connected to February 10th, and then on February 10th, we received the prophetic sign that was expected in advance of February 10th. The prophetic sign on February 10th that was predicted in advance of February 10th was the big news of pop singer Taylor Swift's race across the Pacific Ocean in her private jet so that she could attend the Super Bowl. This prophetic plane sign and the important stories that God is telling that relate to this are explained in the must-watch Swift Super Bowl video. For example, it will be explained how Swift's race across the Pacific in her private plane, with the goal of reaching the Super Bowl in time, points to the Amelia Earhart prophetic sign and her disappearance in a private plane as she was flying across the Pacific Ocean with the goal of becoming the first woman to fly solo around the world. The Amelia Earhart video on this channel will explain how the date of Earhart's plane crash on July 2nd, the date 7/2 in 1937, confirms the addition of 7 times 2 days from Taylor Swift's race across the Pacific Ocean in her private plane on February 10th to reach the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in her private Air Force plane 7 times 2 days later as she flies across the country. After flying across the ocean, Swift landed her plane at LAX Airport in Los Angeles, and Harris is predicted to crash in St. Louis, near where the paths of the 2 great American eclipses will engender an X, on her flight path from Washington, D.C. to LAX. What I am saying is that when this prediction comes to pass, you should know that you need to watch every minute of every video on this channel, including all 50 of the videos that tell the different stories from God through different trails of signs that led to February 10th. Then watch the Swift Super Bowl video that explains the signs that occurred on February 10th and how they point to the date of Harris's predicted crash on May 19th. What I am saying is that the videos in which it was predicted that Kamala Harris would die in a plane crash on February 10th are 100% correct. What I am saying is do not skip these videos that are predicting February 10th. They must be watched. If you do not watch these videos and learn about the important stories God has been telling, you will have missed entirely the point of this prediction that is from God for Harris's death in a plane crash. Believe me, I know far better than you why God is giving this prediction, and it is so that you learn the information that is contained in these 50 other videos that predicted February 10th. Let's begin with this date and this date. These two dates were known ahead of time to be relevant related to the predicted day that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. It was known ahead of time that these two dates were 54 days apart. This is why it could have been predicted ahead of time that this would be the date that the Russian general leader of the Wagner Group would die in a plane crash. This is because the 54th Massachusetts Regiment in the Civil War fought valiantly at Fort Wagner. The 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment, was infamously not paid the $13 that the other white Union soldiers were paid, and this is what is hinted at with this 130 days connection. 130 hints at the number 13. On this date, Hamas fired one of its own rockets at one of its hospitals, killing hundreds of people, and in Hebrew gematria, Hamas equals 130, which confirms this 130 days connection, and Hamas hints at Harris, who is predicted to die in a plane crash after the explosion of her plane's engine. Because of this explosion in Gaza, the four-party summit talk was canceled right as Biden was boarding his Air Force One plane, and this was also the day that Kamala Harris boarded her Air Force Two plane and flew to the Four Corners region for a talk at a university. This alluded to the four horns and four craftsmen described in the first chapter of the book of Zechariah, the main verse of which is 1:17, which is what the date 1017 hinted at. God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter, as the Bible says is required, and this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination, and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. If we think about it, one simple way in which God would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 9, 23, and 44. This is because the Antichrist is the 44th president who became the president in 2009 and is the basketball president who wore jersey number 23 when he played basketball in high school. Also, the mark of the Antichrist is alluded to in Ezekiel chapter 9, and the mark of the Antichrist changes a person's 23 chromosomes. It is predicted that after Kamala Harris's plane crash, Michelle Obama will replace her and become the Queen of America. This is why exactly 9 months before Harris's predicted death was the day that the Queen of Rock and Roll, Tina Turner, died at the age of 83, and 83 is the 23rd prime number, which pairs with this 9 months to confirm the signs and connections. Tina Turner died in Switzerland, and she is known for having traded in her U.S. citizenship for Swiss citizenship. Switzerland is symbolic of mountains and a high place, and Kamala Harris will die after her plane falls from the sky, a high place. The word Obama in Hebrew means from a high place. Tina Turner staged her big comeback at the age of 44, and God uses records for his signs, and Tina Turner became the oldest person to have a #1 hit, What's Love Got to Do with It, on the top 100 Billboard chart at the age of 44, which pairs with this 23 and 9 months connection. She also holds the record of largest paying concert attendance at 180,000, which is 60 plus 60 plus 60,000, which hints at 666, the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash exactly 2 times 3 months, which hints at 23 and pairs with this 9 months connection after the day that the Russian general leader of the Wagner Group died in a plane crash, on the day that Trump, God's trumpet that he uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs, was arrested for the 4th time in the 4th state to join the Union, which hints at the number 44, and pairs with this 2 times 3 months, which hints at 23, to confirm these signs and connections. God's prophetic signs cannot be fully and properly understood without their context and connections to the other prophetic signs. It is an interconnected web. This diagram illustrates how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections works, which is only being explained on this channel. It works on signs connecting to other relevant related signs and produces trails of signs through which God tells very important stories that everyone needs to know. This is why, for example, this trail of signs right here that points to the 54th Massachusetts Regiment that wasn't paid the $13 that the white soldiers were paid is preceded by this connection to the day that a truck crashed into the Apple store in Plymouth, Massachusetts. The reason why the Apple store is relevant and why this crash connects to the day that Kamala Harris is predicted to crash is because the Apple store hints at smartphones and the internet, which will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist, which is why the first Apple computer sold for $666.66. The unfair pay for the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, the first black regiment in the Civil War that was not paid the $13 that the white Union soldiers were paid, is an example of oppressive minority law. Apple hints at food and the mark of the Antichrist through smartphones, and paying with digital currency will be enforced through rationing of food. Only those who have taken the mark of the Antichrist will be entitled to buy or sell the rationed food, which will be an oppressive minority law. This is also the reason for the currency, the $13, in this prophetic sign. The first black regiment hints at the first black president, the Antichrist, who on his 54th birthday as president was in Chicago, his hometown, and while he was in Chicago on his birthday, 4 sisters had 4 babies in 4 days, which hinted at the 44th president who is from Chicago. Chicago in English gematria is 276. This is one reason for this 276 days connection to the 4th arrest in the 4th state. 276 is the 23rd triangular number, which in a triangle of numbers, the last number in the 23rd row is 276. Hence, this pairs with the 44 in the 4th arrest in the 4th state. A man drove his 4x4 Toyota 4Runner and crashed it into the Apple store, killing 1 person and injuring 22 for a total of 23 people, making this 4x4 4Runner and 23 people a pairing with this 23rd triangular number. 22 people were injured because the number 22 in God's signs symbolizes the mark of the Antichrist. Plymouth, Massachusetts symbolizes the spiritual founding of America and the pilgrims who landed on Plymouth Rock. The Pilgrims arrived and anchored off of Cape Cod exactly 402 years before the crash into the Apple Store in Plymouth, because 402 years hints at 42 months, the symbolic period of time of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. This 276 number is prophetic because in the Bible, 276 souls were shipwrecked. This connects to the ship of the Mayflower that brought the Pilgrims across the Atlantic, who chose to anchor off of Cape Cod instead of continuing to Virginia in order to avoid being shipwrecked. It connects to the crash of the 4x4 Forerunner into the Apple Store in Plymouth, a type of shipwreck, and it connects to the ship, Kamala Harris's plane, that is predicted to crash. This exact 2 times 3 months to Harris's predicted crash from Wagner's plane crash is preceded by exactly 44 months, which pairs with this 23 and also pairs with this 4th arrest in the 4th state, to the day it was reported in the national news that 9 earthquakes had occurred within 24 hours in California. This 9 pairs with the 44 to confirm the signs and connections. This 24-hour period coincided with Christmas Eve into Christmas morning. The number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, as from the Bible it symbolizes God's judgment, and these 9 earthquakes that coincided with Christmas Eve and Christmas morning hinted at the coming judgment upon Christ's return. And on the day of these 9 earthquakes in California, Kamala Harris was the senator from California. In the Bible, the falling of trees is symbolic of national judgment, and on this same day as the 9 earthquakes, an old-growth tree that had been standing since the founding of America in Muir Woods National Park fell on a hiker, killing him, and he was pronounced dead 23 minutes after the call was made to 911. This 23 minutes pairs with the 9 earthquakes. The hiker was Indian American, and Kamala Harris is also Indian American. In other words, this death hinted at the death of Kamala Harris, who is of Indian descent. 9 and 23 are paired together to confirm the signs and connections, and Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash exactly 2 times 3 months after the Russian general died in a plane crash, which was exactly 9 weeks after 9 search and rescue ships were disbanded that were 900 miles off the coast of Cape Cod, when it was finally learned the fate of the Titanic sub that had imploded, which is symbolic of an explosion and a crash of a vehicle and hints at Kamala Harris's plane crash. The 9 ships and 900 miles pairs with 9 weeks, as does the fact that the wreckage of the sub was discovered 4 times 400 feet from the bow of the Titanic. This hints at 44 and pairs with the 9. The big story regarding this Titanic sub was the urgent, dramatic search and rescue effort for the 5 people in the sub that had 4 days of oxygen, which hinted at 54, and this connects to the death of Wagner, which is then followed by 54 days, which hints at the 54th Regiment that fought at Fort Wagner. The wreckage of the sub was discovered at the sandy bottom of the ocean, and this search and rescue effort was called off exactly 23 weeks, which pairs with this 9 weeks after the day that Julian Sands, which hints at the sandy bottom of the ocean, disappeared on a mountain. The famous actor disappeared on a mountain, and a search and rescue effort began, which parallels the search and rescue effort for the Titanic sub. Julian Sands' accident on the height of a mountain hints at the implosion of the sub at the depth of the Titanic, which hints at the crash of Kamala Harris's airplane from a high height, which hints at the coming authoritarian tracking of people's locations through their cell phones, and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist through their cell phones. Julian Sands' big break in Hollywood movies was his role in the movie A Room with a View, which was nominated for Academy Awards, and A Room with a View is exactly what the Titanic submarine was. It was a room with a view of the sunken Titanic. Julian Sands' most famous role was of him as the warlock in the movie Warlock, which hints at the coming sorcery of the Antichrist and his allegiance to Satan, who became president in 2009 and wore jersey 23, which is the reason for these connections of 23 weeks and 9 weeks from the disappearance of Julian Sands. The search and rescue effort for Julian Sands was called off after his body was found just 3 days after the search and rescue effort for the Titanic sub was called off after the wreckage of the sub was found. Sands' body was discovered on the height of a mountain, and the sub was discovered at the depth of the ocean. 2,520 days is symbolic of the period of the end times and the Antichrist in Bible prophecy, which is what is hinted at with this 2,520 hours connection, which connects to the death of the Wagner general, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment that fought at Fort Wagner and was not paid the equivalent that the white soldiers were paid, which was oppressive minority law, through currency. And this is why this connects to the date that Daniel Penny, which hints at money, was finally charged for choking to death on a subway in New York City when he was restraining a homeless person who was known for impersonating Michael Jackson, MJ. MJ in Simple English Gematria is 23, and Michael Jackson famously grew up with his Jackson siblings at 2300 Jackson Street in Chicago, where Michael Jordan, another MJ, famously wore jersey number 23 while playing for the Chicago Bulls, and Chicago is the hometown of Barack Obama, who also wore jersey number 23. And Chicago in English Gematria is 276, the 23rd triangular number, and MJ in Simple English Gematria is 23. President Grover Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. He skipped the 23rd presidency, just like how Barack Obama will also serve non-consecutive terms, skipping the 45th presidency, and 45 is the 9th triangular number, making this a pairing of 9 and 23. This was also the day that the cheaters in the Cleveland fishing scandal, in the Cleveland fishing tournament scandal, were sentenced and were ordered to forfeit their $130,000 boat that they had won in a tournament, and $130,000 hints at the $13 that the 54th Massachusetts Regiment wasn't paid. This was also the day that the man in California, where Kamala Harris is from and where it is predicted that she will be flying from, pleaded guilty to intentionally crashing his plane in order to promote a wallet on YouTube. The wallet and the $130,000 and Daniel Penny all hint at currency and the 54th Massachusetts Regiment and the enforcement of the mark of the Antichrist through digital currency. In Bible prophecy, 42 months is symbolic of the period of the Antichrist, and also on this date, the section of Title 42 regarding the CVD disease and the nation's border wall of security expired, and the invasion of illegal aliens is a parallel with the walls of security that collapsed on the ancient city of Jericho in God's judgment in the Bible. And Title 42, which hints at the Antichrist, is a second witness to this 2,520 number, which in Bible prophecy is also symbolic of the period of the Antichrist. This date is 119 days, which hints at 9/11, the day of the big warning of judgment, and the collapse of the World Trade Center, as in buying and selling food. And 119 days is also 17 weeks, and the two World Trade Center towers were hit by planes 17 minutes apart, to the day that Lisa Marie died, the King of Rock and Roll's daughter, and the King of Rock and Roll named his very famous airplane Lisa Marie, making the death of Lisa Marie a prophetic sign pointing to the death of Kamala Harris in an airplane crash. Elvis was fond of gold. He famously furnished the inside of his plane with gold, including the bathroom fixtures. In his famous Graceland estate, there is the Hall of Gold where he has hung his gold albums. He famously wore a gold suit, which is why on the day that Lisa Marie died, gold closed at exactly 1,923.00, which is astounding because it closed at an exact number with 0 cents, and 923 is a pairing of 9 and 23, which confirms the signs and connection. As well, gold on this day gained exactly $1.30, which hints at the $13 that the 54th Massachusetts Regiment wasn't paid. And this trail of signs, this story God is telling, is pointing to the digital currency that will be used to enforce the mark of the Antichrist by the Antichrist King, Barack Obama. Gold is the currency that God created for man that cannot be manipulated and cannot be controlled by a centralized government. The Antichrist is the 44th president who will come to power after the death of Kamala Harris in a plane crash, which is why exactly 4 times 4 weeks after the death of Lisa Marie, at the age of 54, by the way, which hints at the 54th Massachusetts Regiment, was the date 5-4, when 5 horses had died in 4 days at the Kentucky Derby racetrack, and the 4th inmate named Harris was captured at the I-55 highway, which also hinted at 54 on this date 5-4. The 4th escaped inmate was captured next to the I-55 highway right near Elvis's Graceland estate, which is where Lisa Marie was after she had just landed on the Lisa Marie plane when Elvis died. And within 5 days, 4 horses died at the Kentucky Derby racetrack right near where President Lincoln was born. On this 5-4 date, on which 5 horses had died in 4 days near the birthplace of President Lincoln, the 16th president, which hints at 4 times 4 and the number 44, hence the connection of 4 times 4 weeks on each side of this date. On this 5-4 date was the National Day of Prayer, which was initiated by President Lincoln with his Proclamation 97, in which he warned that God would judge and destroy America if it were to continue in unrighteousness. And 97 is the 25th prime number, which hints at the 25th Amendment, which will be used to replace Kamala Harris and make the 44th president the president again. The Wagner plane crash was 1,109 days after Biden announced that Kamala Harris would be his vice presidential running mate, and God pairs 110 and 9 together to point to 9/11, as explained in other videos. Kamala Harris is the 49th vice president, which is why her symbolic beginning as vice president on the day of Biden's announcement was exactly 227 months after 9/11, the day of the plane crashes and the collapse of 110 stories, as in the 110 and 9 pairing. Joshua died at the age of 110, and he led the Israelites around Jericho before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment after they blew trumpets. And after the 110 stories collapsed on 9/11, Trump, God's trumpet, famously called in, trumpeted to Channel 9 News and mentioned, trumpeted, how his tower on Wall Street had become the tallest tower in Lower Manhattan, which is one reason why God pairs 9 and 110 together to point to 9/11. 227 is the 49th prime number, which is why it connects to the rise of the 49th vice president. Kamala Harris's plane crash is predicted to be in St. Louis, which is why exactly 4 times 4 months before her crash was the day of the school shooting in St. Louis by a man named Orlando Harris. In the movie Flight, the name of the character played by Denzel Washington, as in Harris in Washington, D.C., is Alonzo Harris. The movie Flight is about a plane crash. In the shooting, there were 3 deaths and 7 injured. This is a typo. This hinted at 3 sets of 7 because in the book of Joshua in the Bible, the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed in God's judgment. The Israelites marched around Jericho once per day for 7 days, and then on the 7th day, they marched around 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7, and this is why this school shooting is exactly 2 plus 3 months, which hints at 23, which pairs with this 4 times 4 months after this other infamous school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, in which 7 plus 7 plus 7 people were killed, 3 sets of 7. The story of this shooting is how the shooter managed to get inside the locked school. He breached the security perimeter, the wall of security around the school. Uvalde is situated precisely between the border wall of security with Mexico and San Antonio, which is known for its Battle of the Alamo, in which the security walls of Alamo were breached. This is why this Alamo, Texas border wall of security sign that killed 7 plus 7 plus 7 people, as in the walls of security in the book of Joshua, that collapsed in God's judgment, was exactly 7 plus 7 plus 7 days, as in 21 days, as in 21 people killed, after the infamous breach of security at the Supreme Court of the U.S. This regarded their ruling on abortions, which was confirmation that mass school shootings have been judgment from God for abortions. The murder of people's children in schools is judgment for their condoning of murder of unborn babies. This is why the big promoter of abortion rights, Vice President Kamala Harris, is predicted to die exactly 21 months after 21 people were killed in the school shooting in Uvalde, Texas, which was near the border wall of security, which is why 21 months is 7 plus 7 plus 7 months, and why it connects to the Supreme Court's breach of security with 7 plus 7 plus 7 days. America's walls of security have been breached, and the Antichrist will soon become the president again after it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. All right, welcome. In this video, I will explain a number of profound reasons for how it is known that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash on February 10th, 2024 in St. Louis due to turbulence and a bird strike. Anyway, also in this video, I will include how God has incorporated Amelia Earhart, the greatest aviation mystery of all time, the 20th century of all time, of course. Aviation started in the early 20th century. And that'll be amazing as well. So stay tuned for that part of this explanation and part of God's signs that are pointing to the date that Kamala Harris is predicted to die in a plane crash in St. Louis on February 10th, 2024. To explain this, I'm just going to read this email that I composed. And as we can see, this email was composed on January 31st, 2024. Okay, January 31st, 2024. So let's begin. This email is documenting the prediction that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash in St. Louis on February 10th, 2024. her plane crash will be caused by lightning, turbulence, and a bird strike. It is predicted that she will be replaced by Michelle Obama. Soon after, Joe Biden is predicted to step down, and Michelle will become the 47th president. She is predicted, and that's predicted to be on February 20th. She is predicted to appoint Barack Obama as the 51st vice president on March 6th, 2024. Soon after this, it is predicted that the Obamas will divorce or separate, and Obama will become the 48th president, and that is predicted to be on March 20th, 2024. Today's date is January 31st, 2024. God is pointing to the 24th of Shavat, which is from sunset February 2nd to sunset February 3rd. It is now believed that February 2nd will be a step in the trail of signs, and that Harris's crash will be on the anniversary of the Israeli F-16 fighter jet that was shot down by Iran and Syria on February 10th, 2018, on the 24th of Shavat. I was closely following along with Dan Matson at the time, and Dan was able to predict the 11-hour window for this incident based on the recent Jupiter-Mars conjunction and the Revelation chapter 12 sign in the night sky that occurred in September of 2017. So just a few months before January of 2017, and Dan being able to foresee that God was pointing to an 11-hour window in which the F-16 of the Israeli Defense Forces was shot down. So he predicted that ahead of time. And that's because, of course, Mars is symbolism for war. I'll attach a diagram he made. Well, I won't actually, but it's pretty interesting. I'm speaking to some friends that I'm writing to here. Incidentally, this was a sort of beginning of realizing that things could be predicted in advance, although this wasn't fully appreciated until December of 2019. And what I'm referring to is that things being able to be predicted in advance. God arranged it so that Dan and I were sharing closely together during this period in early 2018, so that this plane crash would be set in my memory, so that it could be recalled now to confirm February 10th, 2024, the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Which again is okay. So I'm talking about Shavat 24 as well, and let's see, have I already? So sorry, never mind. Also, recall that October 7th, which was the day of the Hamas breaking through the security barrier into Israel, was exactly 69 months after the Jupiter-Mars conjunction on January 7th, 2018. This Mars-Jupiter conjunction that I just mentioned a minute ago occurred on this date, and that date, which again, Mars is about war, that date was exactly 69 months before October 7th, 2023, which is astounding because 69 months is a period of time, and in the most central prophecy in the Bible, we have a period of 69 weeks, but the weeks is just a metaphor. So anyway, that's why that's astounding. The F-16 and 16 hints at 4 times 4, and the 44th president was shot down exactly 2 times 3 years, which hints at 23, before February 10th, 2024, making this a pairing of 44 and 23. And I'm speaking in short notation here because the people that I am writing to already know what I am referring to. But what I am referring to is how God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, works. It works on the principle of second and third and multiple witnesses confirming a matter as the Bible says is required. And this is what makes what is being explained on this channel true and not a product of one's imagination and different and unique than everything else on the internet that claims to be an analysis of God's prophetic signs. And one simple way, if we think about it, in which he would provide a second witness for us is through pairing certain numbers together, such as 44 and 23. And that's essentially because the 44th president was the basketball president who wore jersey 23. And the reason why I know that God pairs 44 and 23 to confirm his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections is because I have been studying his big picture of signs, patterns, and connections for full-time hours from morning until night for 6 years. Okay, so also the shoot down of the Israeli F-16, which hints at 4 times 4 by Iran, is 2 times 3 years to Harris's predicted crash, which is 4 times 4 days to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran on February 26th. All right. Now, well, just a side note, February 26th hints at 226 and the 226th word in Strong's Hebrew Old Testament Concordance, which is the word that means prophetic sign. Anyway, that's another pairing of 23 and 44 because it's the F-16 that connects with the 2 times 3 years. And it's also 4 times 4 days because the F-16 was shot down by Iran. And February 10th, 2024, in turn, connects with 4 times 4 days to the date it is predicted that Israel will bomb Iran. Okay, so that's another 23 and 44. February 10th will be 8 days after the date 2-2, February 2nd. The sign God will be pointing to on February 2nd, because this email is being composed before February 2nd, the sign that God will be pointing to on February 2nd is Harris's visit to the 8th state, South Carolina. We are blessed to be able to know in advance what the sign on February 2nd, 2-2, will be, and to not have to wait. This will be Harris's 3rd visit to South Carolina in a month. She visited on January 6th, 9 + 9 + 9 days before February 2nd. And she visited 9 days after January 6th. She visited South Carolina 9 days after January 6th on January 15th, which is 9 + 9 days before February 2nd. February 2nd, the date 2-2, will be her 9th visit to South Carolina as vice president. And this is all because the number 9 is the most important number in God's true big picture of signs, patterns, and connections, which is only being explained on this channel, as from the Bible, the number 9 symbolizes God's judgment. On January 6th, she visited Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the location where the spy balloon was shot down, which was a prophetic sign that also hints at Kamala Harris's plane, because the spy balloon was shot down by a plane and crashed, and Kamala Harris will crash in her plane. And that's just scratching the surface of how the spy balloon was a prophetic sign pointing to Kamala Harris and her predicted death in a plane crash. The spy balloon sign was about its path from west to east across the nation, and this pointed to the path of totality of the eclipse in 2017 from west to east across the nation, where it exited the U.S. over South Carolina. On January 15th, Kamala Harris visited Columbia, which in God's signs is symbolism for America, the name Columbia, South Carolina, for King Day at the Dome, which hinted at kingdom, possibly kingdom of the Antichrist or the coming kingdom of Christ, as it was her 8th visit to the 8th state, and Jesus in Greek gematria equals 888. Or perhaps both. Perhaps this visit to South Carolina for King Day at the Dome, hinting at kingdom, is a hint at both the Antichrist kingdom and the coming kingdom. By the way, if you don't know what gematria is, Roman, Greek, and Hebrew letters are also numbers, and as such, names can be converted into a numeric value. And Jesus equals 888, and anyway, it was her 8th visit to the 8th state when she went there for King Day at the Dome. Okay, now back to what I was saying here. This is why this is a very important sign. Her 9th visit to South Carolina on the date 2/2 is because it is pointing to the path of totality. Because the balloon was shot down off the coast of South Carolina after its path across the nation from west to east, and also the eclipse exited the U.S. after making a path across the U.S. from west to east. And so, anyway, Kamala Harris will also die in a plane crash on her flight across the nation. Whether that is from west to east or east to west, it doesn't really matter. But she will crash in St. Louis also because of this, because the path of totality passed over St. Louis, the biggest city over which it passed over. Anyway, so that's what I'm getting at here is February 2nd. The reason why it's so important and her visit there is because of the prophetic significance of South Carolina and paths across the U.S. Okay. On February 2nd, 2/2, she will visit a university in Orangeburg, South Carolina. Orangeburg, South Carolina was within the path of totality of the eclipse, as was Columbia, South Carolina. Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, the other place she visited within a month period to South Carolina, also hints at the path of totality because of the balloon. And so all 3 of her visits to South Carolina this year in 2024 hint at the path of the eclipse. Trump, God's trumpet, who God uses to trumpet and highlight his prophetic signs. As in archaic English, the name Trump means trumpet or the sounding of a trumpet. Trumpet will be in South Carolina, will also be in South Carolina on 2/2. He will be in Columbia, which again is symbolic of America. His visit on 2/2 will be a trumpet pointing to Harris in South Carolina on 2/2, who will be southeast of him, which will mirror the path of the eclipse over South Carolina, because the eclipse moved from west to east and it passed over Columbia before it passed over Orangeburg. So you follow what I'm saying there? Trumpet will be trumpeting basically the eclipse. In summary, God very cleverly led us to October 17th in order to point to Zechariah chapter 1. Myrtle trees, Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, and the 24th of Shavat. This led us to the 24th of Shavat because the prophecy in Zechariah 1 is dated the 24th of Shavat, as I explained in the Gaza hospital explosion video. Okay, so just a refresher though, the amazing signs on October 17th pointed to Zechariah chapter 1, which is about myrtle trees, which hinted at Myrtle Beach, South Carolina, as was explained in the Gaza video. And the prophecy, this very important prophecy in the book of Zechariah chapter 1, is dated. Zechariah recorded the date on which he received the prophecy, which was the 24th day of Shavat, which was in this year in the Hebrew calendar, February 2nd to 3rd, because Hebrew calendar dates begin at sunset. Okay, so this led us to February 2nd, the 24th of Shavat, and South Carolina. And because of Myrtle Beach, because of myrtle trees in the prophecy, and because of the connection, as I explained in the Gaza video. Okay, so in other words, October 17th already pointed to South Carolina. And through this, God is again confirming, through the signs on February 2nd, God is again confirming that her flight path will mirror the eclipse's path, and therefore he is again confirming that Harris will crash in St. Louis. And the purpose of all of this will be to again point God's purpose will again be to point to the eclipse, the big warning of judgment, the great American eclipse. That was in 2017. By the way, for more explanation on the eclipse, watch part 5 of the video series that I made way back in 2017 before the eclipse, titled The Most Astounding Information Ever. It was the first 5 videos I ever made, but the 5th one is about an hour long, and it goes into good, important detail regarding the great American eclipse judgment warning sign. Okay? On this note, St. Louis will point to Little Egypt because the eclipse peaked over St. Louis and over the area of the country nicknamed Little Egypt. Because this is prophetic from the Bible, Egypt, the Israelites in Egypt were afflicted for 430 years, as the Bible says, and the Israeli F-16 was shot down in 2018, what I'm speaking of. It was shot down at 4:30 a.m. All right. Now, here is the part about Amelia Earhart, this prophetic sign that God is using here. It's quite something. In the midst of Harris's prophetic visits to South Carolina this year, God used an ocean exploration company based in Charleston, South Carolina, which, by the way, is where the eclipse exited into the Atlantic Ocean. And speaking of ocean here, we're talking about an ocean exploration company. So the eclipse exited over Charleston, South Carolina, over into the Atlantic Ocean, and now, in the midst of these prophetic Harris visits to South Carolina this year, God has used an ocean exploration company based in Charleston, South Carolina. You follow what I'm saying? God is continuing the path into the Atlantic Ocean because of through this ocean exploration company. Okay, and he used this company to point to the greatest aviation mystery, the death in a plane crash of the first woman to attempt to fly around the world solo, points to the first woman vice president who will die in a plane crash. Amelia Earhart, along with her navigator, disappeared near Howland Island in the Pacific Ocean after they had departed Hawaii. This was on the date 7/2, July 2nd, in 1937. The death of the 2 aviators on July 2nd, 1937, after their departure from Hawaii, was exactly 84 years after, I should say before, 2 pilots crashed their cargo Boeing 737, which hints at 37, as in 1937, in the ocean after they had departed Hawaii on July 2nd in 2021. Obama in Hebrew gematria equals 84, and he was born on the date 8/4, August 4th. Obama is also from Hawaii, and of course it is through the death of Kamala Harris that in a plane crash that Obama will become the president again and the Antichrist. That is the reason why Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash. Okay, so again, I'm just going to repeat this. The Amelia Earhart and her navigator, okay, the 2 aviators that died in a plane crash mysteriously after departing Hawaii on July 2nd, 1937, was exactly 84 years before two pilots and only two people in the plane crashed their cargo Boeing 737, which hints at 1937, into the ocean after they had departed Hawaii on the same calendar date, July 2nd in 2021. And so this 84 years hints at Obama, because Obama in Hebrew is 84, and he was born on the date 8/4. Also, Obama is from Hawaii. The two pilots were rescued by the U.S. Coast Guard after a brief search. The U.S. searched the Pacific Ocean for 4 times 4 days, which hints at the 44th president, for Amelia Earhart and her navigator. Finally, it is known how this crash on July 2nd, 2021 fits into the big picture. I hadn't thought previously about Amelia Earhart's plane crash, but I certainly should have. Anyway, on the date January 27th, the Charleston company, Deep Sea Vision, posted on social media that they believe they have finally discovered Earhart's plane. So this is how God brings it all into the present moment. It is through this Charleston company and the date that they posted that they had discovered her plane. Their post on the 27th of the month hints at the date of Earhart's crash on 7/2, which outside of the US is written as 2/7, which hints at 27. And the cargo plane crash also on the same date, 7/2. The 27th of the month, as in January 27th, the day that the Charleston company posted they had discovered her plane, is 2 times 7 days before Harris's predicted crash on February 10th, 2024. That is amazing. So, again, Earhart's plane was posted to have been discovered on the 27th. Earhart's crash was on 7/2. 84 years later, it was also a 7/2. This is the reason for the 84 years in between the two crashes is to give a confirmation for the relevance of the plane being discovered on the 27th, because it is a 7 and a 2. And that is for adding 2 times 7 days to get February 10th, the date of Kamala Harris's plane crash. The first woman vice president will crash. I should say acting vice president, because, well, you know what I'm talking about. Will be pointed to through the first woman attempting to fly around the world and her crash. Okay, this connection of 2 times 7 days is also 336 hours. And in Strong's Greek Concordance, the 336th word means put to death. All right, as you know, originally this video was produced prior to February 10th. And as I just explained, the Amelia Earhart sign and the announcement of its discovery, her plane, was 2 times 7 days before February 10th. And then we had on February 10th the Swift Super Bowl sign and her flight across the Pacific Ocean, as I explained at the beginning of this video. And that's why it is another 2 times 7 days from this Swift sign that points to Amelia Earhart, who crashed on the date 7/2, which hints at 7 times 2 days. And so from Swift's race across the Pacific, it is another 2 times 7 days to the date it is predicted that Kamala Harris will die in a plane crash as she flies across the country on February 24th. Earhart equals earthquake. The name Earhart seems to hint at earthquake, The walls of Jericho collapsed in God's judgment due to an earthquake. It was Joshua who led the Israelites in a symbolic 3 sets of 7 around the walls of Jericho before they collapsed, and Joshua died at the age of 110. February 10th, 2024 will be exactly 73, which hints at 3 sets of 7, months after the end of the earthquake tetrad on the date January 10th, 110, which hints at 110 in 2018. The earthquake tetrad was 4 7.0 or greater earthquakes spaced by 177 days. Okay, the earthquakes were 177 days apart. All 4 of them were 7.0 or greater, and there were no intervening 7.0 or greater earthquakes. This is the same as a blood moon tetrad lunar eclipse. This is the same as a blood moon lunar eclipse tetrad, okay? And so that's why this is, if you will, an earthquake tetrad. The third of the 4 dates was extremely prophetic, but that is the subject of another video. The last date was also prophetic, as I just said. The last of the dates was January 10th. And that hints at Joshua, who died at the age of 110 after the walls of security collapsed due to an earthquake. Archaeology proves that, by the way. The walls of Jericho collapsing due to an earthquake. So you get what I'm saying here? So the earthquake tetrad ended on January 10th, which is a Joshua date because it hints at 110. The earthquake tetrad, okay, I just explained that. So Harris's predicted crash on February 10th hints at 210, which is 70 plus 70 plus 70, and this hints at 3 sets of 7 before the earthquake at Jericho. Okay, because again, in the book of Joshua, the Israelites enacted a symbolic 3 sets of 7. They marched around the walls 7 times, once per day, and then on the 7th day, 7 times on the 7th day, and while also blowing 7 trumpets. It was a 3 sets of 7, okay? And so that's why Harris's crash will be on the date 210, which hints at 210, which is 70 plus 70 plus 70, because her crash will be, if you will, a symbolic walls of security collapsing, because it will lead to the rise of the Antichrist as her replacement. Okay, and that's why her crash will be exactly 73 months after the end of the earthquake tetrad. Okay? All right. Biden named Harris as her vice presidential candidate, as his vice presidential candidate, running mate, on August 11th, 2020, exactly 135 weeks after the end of the earthquake tetrad. G135 is the word meaning a riddle, an enigma. And what I mean by that is the 135th word in the Greek concordance. Okay, so it's meaning a riddle, and so that's the riddle. Okay, that's the confirmation that the 73 months from the end of the earthquake tetrad is relevant, because 135 weeks after the end of the earthquake tetrad points to the symbolic date for Kamala Harris, which was the day that he was named Biden's vice presidential candidate running mate. Therefore, this is a clue, as in riddle, an enigma, that points to the importance of Harris's death in a plane crash, as she will be replaced by the Antichrist. The end of the earthquake tetrad on January 10th, which hints at 110, in 2018 was 110 days after the Revelation 12 sign. The 73 months connection between the earthquake tetrad and Harris's predicted crash is also 2,222 days, and the Revelation 12 sign on the 22nd of September was 2,222 days after the Washington, D.C. earthquake cracked the Washington Monument. Washington was born on the date 2/22. The Swan Islands earthquake 2018 was a strike-slip earthquake. This was the earthquake at the end of the earthquake tetrad. Harris's crash will be due to a bird strike, hence the Swan Islands strike-slip earthquake. Harris will be replaced by the 44th president, and the Swan Islands earthquake 2018 was 44 kilometers east of Great Swan Island. The Swan Islands earthquake 2009 was 7.3 in magnitude, which hints at 3 sets of 7. It had 3 4.0 aftershock earthquakes, which hints at 444 and the 44th president. And it was 4 months and 8 days, as in the 48th president, Barack Obama, after the 44th president's inauguration, which was exactly 1,260 years after the deadliest earthquake in Israel in 749 AD that killed tens of thousands of people. The reason for 1,260 years being relevant is because the Antichrist is mentioned 7 times in Bible prophecy as being a ruler in a period of 1,260 days, which is why Obama's inauguration was exactly 1,260 years after the deadliest earthquake in Israel history. Okay, so did you follow this here? Okay, so we had the connection to the earthquake tetrad, 73 months, okay, which is also, incidentally, 2,222 days, all right? Now again, the earthquake tetrad was which hints at 110, was 110 days after the Revelation chapter 12 sign. The great sign in heaven. There's only 2 signs in the Bible described as being great. This was fulfilled anyway. So, in other words, the earthquake tetrad, which hints at 110 because of the date, was 110 days after the Revelation 12 sign, and 2,222 days after the earthquake tetrad is the day Harris's plane will crash, but also 2,222 days before the Revelation 12 sign that occurred on the 22nd of the month was the Washington, D.C. earthquake. And of course, Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash will be significant for Washington, D.C. because it will lead to a change in the White House with the Antichrist. Okay, and the Washington, D.C. earthquake cracked the Washington Monument. That was the thing that it was known for. And Washington was born on the date 2/22, which is why we have the 2,222 days connection to the 22nd of the month. Also, Washington is symbolism for America, and this is a warning of judgment, destruction of America, ultimately. Okay. The Washington, D.C. earthquake was exactly 9 years before the drawbridge at the Twin Towers, which looked like an 11, which makes it a pairing of 9 and 11, which God pairs together to confirm his signs, patterns, and connections, in London, stopped working on August 23rd, 2020, which is where David Blaine, who was born on the date the Twin Towers in New York officially opened, hung in a plexiglass cube for 44 days. David Blaine hung on the London drawbridge, the London Towers drawbridge, for 44 days. He hung in a plexiglass cube without food for 44 days, and this hints at the 44th president. Also, the 9 years hints at 2009. The 44th president became the president in 2009. Okay, so 9 years to the day that the drawbridge Twin Towers stopped working. And that pairs with the 44 because the drawbridge is associated with David Blaine. Because David Blaine was born on the same day that the Twin Towers were officially opened. Furthermore, David Blaine held the record for most number of minutes holding his breath underwater, 17 minutes and 4 seconds. And that is because the Twin Towers were struck by the two planes 17 minutes apart. That's just, David Blaine is also from New York City and on and on. Anyway, that's why he's associated with these two towers in London prophetically. All right, so Blaine's stunt was next to Potter's Field. Not only was he hanging from the Twin Tower there, but it was also next to Potter's Field, which hints at the Potter's Field in New York City, where David Blaine is from, and famously from. He got his start by doing street magic in the street of New York City. Okay, and Potter's Field in New York City was the big deal during the CVD disease, when they were piling up the bodies that they were murdering in the hospital in Queens. You heard me correctly. And the prediction in this video will prove what I just said. And the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove what I just said. Make no mistake. If you didn't know that, you've been brainwashed. And that was the big hype, by the way, for the supposed deadliness of this CVD disease, which wasn't, of course, deadly like it was being portrayed in the first days in New York City to get everyone scared out of their minds. It was because the death toll piled up in the one hospital, the Elmhurst Hospital, because they were literally murdering their patients in the hospital. All right? And that's for a number of reasons, but it all is traced back to Satan ultimately. But there were incentives like, the amount of money they would get, the use of the controversial treatment beginning with an R and ending with a Esavir, okay, and it begins with a REM. You know what I'm talking about, right? The REM and then it ends with a Esavir. Got it? The thing that is actually snake poison, literally. Okay, enough. Make no mistake. The reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to interject these things here and there, these truths, and no one will otherwise listen to unless it's slammed in their face with a prediction like this. Make no mistake. The reason why God has given me a voice is through this prediction is to prove what I just said. So wake up. Okay? People were being murdered in the hospital there to create fear for this faux thing. Begins with a P. Okay, let's move on. And August 23rd, 2020 was the 42nd anniversary, 42 in a period of time from Bible prophecy is related to the Antichrist, okay? So August 23rd, 2020 was the 42nd anniversary of Kobe Bryant's birth. Okay, now Kobe is prophetic because his name in Hebrew sounds like CVD disease. Okay, if you sound out his name with using Hebrew, it's the same as CVD. I'm not going to pronounce it. You know what I'm talking about, though, okay? And that's one reason why God used Kobe Bryant. Furthermore, he died in a plane crash and in a helicopter, and the helicopter is a sign that God uses helicopters for their rotor blades, which are in the shape of an X, which hints at the Tav mark, which is the inverse of the mark of the Antichrist in the Bible. Okay, so in other words, the X is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, which, by the way, is why the two eclipse paths which will cross over each other in Little Egypt, will engender an X because it is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist. Okay, so again, I don't want to lose you here. It's not complicated. Blaine's stunt was next to Potter's Field, okay? Hints at the CVD disease. And the date of the drawbridge not working, August 23rd, 2020, was the 42nd, as in symbolic of the Antichrist, after Kobe, which is symbolic of the mark of the Antichrist, his birth, okay? Now, Kobe died in an aviation disaster. The Twin Towers drawbridge went out on August 23rd, 2020, where Blaine hung for 44 days next to Potter's Field, which, by the way, is from the Bible, where it is where Judas hung himself, hence why Blaine hung next to Potter's Field. It's because Judas in the Bible hung himself at Potter's Field. Okay, so again, let's go through this again. Kobe Bryant died in an aviation disaster. The Twin Towers drawbridge went out on August 23rd, 2020, where Blaine hung for 44 days next to Potter's Field on the same day that it was reported that there were 44,000 new CVD cases in the U.S. in the previous 24 hours, which of course was bogus, but God still uses this number anyway. And on the same day, it was reported that there were a total of 23 million cases worldwide, which is astounding because, as I said at the beginning of this video, to confirm his signs and connections, God pairs the numbers 44 and 23 together. And I explained why. The 44th president wore jersey 23 in high school. But that's just the beginning of why God... Anyway, 44,000 cases and 23 million cases were reported on the same day, this prophetic day, on the day that the drawbridge got stuck. And that points to Kobe Bryant because it was on his 42nd birthday, and he hints at the mark of the Antichrist. In other words, it's confirmation that the CVD disease and the thing that people took because of it is the mark of the Antichrist and is not a supposed precursor to the mark of the Antichrist. And make no mistake, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove this. When this prediction comes to pass, end of debate. No more discussion at all as to whether it is or isn't the mark of the Antichrist. It is the mark of the Antichrist in its current form. It does not need an additional something to go with it, such as an additional technology or form of false religious worship, or a supposed new age of dispensation after supposedly all quote-unquote Christians will be raptured. In fact, one of the reasons why a majority of quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist is that it is judgment for this doctrine that is rooted in once saved, always saved, and sovereign grace and dispensationalism and free grace. This idea that what's described, for example, regarding the 7 churches in the book of Revelation does not apply to people that live on this side of the rapture. This disgraceful conclusion, especially given that these letters were written to churches in Asia Minor in this supposed particular, what they call the church age, the age of grace, that supposedly in their theology precedes the tribulation age. Okay, Jesus said he is coming to make war with the sword of his mouth on those that teach and have the works that are a product of the Nicolaitan doctrine of our day. And this is the Nicolaitan doctrine. That's the reason why quote-unquote Christians have already taken the mark of the Antichrist. It is judgment for their Nicolaitan doctrine. And the purpose of this prediction is to prove what I have just said. Now, there is nowhere in the Bible that it says that one cannot repent after taking the mark of the Antichrist. But it is a very serious thing that one has taken it, because it is leading to mass demonic possession. It has changed one's chromosomes. It has put snake chromosomes into the human chromosomes, okay? And on. Watch the snake bite video. And by the way, the commonly held objections based on people's understanding of Bible prophecy are answered at the end of the snake bite video. So make sure you watch the snake bite video. It'll explain more. All right, now back to what we were saying here. Okay, so this is astounding. We were talking about this August 23rd date, which was 9 years after the Washington, D.C. earthquake, which connected to the end of the earthquake tetrad, which connected to how Kamala Harris's aviation disaster, and Kobe Bryant died in an aviation disaster. All right, now here is the thing. August 23rd, 2020 is exactly 181 weeks before Harris's predicted aviation disaster on February 10th, 2024. And Barack Obama in Hebrew gematria is 181. Furthermore, the 42nd prime number is 181. Oh, I mentioned that down in the next sentence, okay? And again, 42 is the number of the Antichrist in Bible prophecy. Barack Obama will replace Harris after her plane crash, which is why we have on August 23rd the sign that hinted at the Twin Towers on 9/11 because of the Twin Towers of the London Bridge and David Blaine. And 9/11 was about plane crashes, which is why this is relevant, this connection between the bridge, Twin Towers, and Kamala Harris's plane crash. The 44,000 and 23 million CVD disease cases on August 23rd, 2020 was on the 42nd anniversary of Kobe, which hints at CVD disease and aviation disaster and a mark of the Antichrist because of rotor blades from a helicopter, and connects to Harris's predicted aviation disaster with the 42nd prime number. Amazing. President Cleveland was the only president to serve non-consecutive terms. He skipped the 23rd presidency. LeBron James, who wears number 23, famously won the championship for Cleveland, his hometown, and broke the supposed Cleveland sports curse, which hints at the curse of the Antichrist. Furthermore, just like President Cleveland, who served non-consecutive terms, LeBron James played non-consecutive terms, if you will, for Cleveland. He famously left Cleveland and famously returned to Cleveland after playing in Miami in order to win the championship. Okay, and all of this is hinting at how Barack Obama, who also wore jersey 23 like LeBron James, and likewise will serve non-consecutive terms, just like President Cleveland, who skipped the 23rd presidency, this is hinting at how Barack Obama will serve non-consecutive terms after Harris's death in a plane crash. Harris's predicted plane crash will be exactly 7 plus 7 times 7, which equals 56, which hints at 3 sets of 7 months after a rare 4.0, which hints at the 44th president, earthquake in Cleveland, Ohio. Okay, it's very rare to have an earthquake in Cleveland, especially a 4.0. And that's why, because of remember I was saying the Israelites enacted a 3 sets of 7 before the walls of security collapsed due to an earthquake. That's why we have this 3 sets of 7 symbolic period of months, exact connection between the earthquake in Cleveland to Kamala Harris's predicted plane crash. This connection, this 56 months connection, which by the way is the ultimate 3 sets of 7 number, because they marched around once per day for 7 days, but on the 7th day, they marched 7 times while blowing 7 trumpets. So in reality, it was a 7 and a 7 times 7, the Israelites in Jericho. All right, this connection is also 4 years and 8 months. And Obama's second non-consecutive presidency will be the 48th presidency. All right, this is merely scratching the surface of the reasons for how this prediction is known in advance. For more information, please visit bitchute.com or odyssey.com, spelled O-D-Y-S-E-E, video channel, Harris Crash Prediction. That's the name of the channels. And also read the website trumpprediction.com. Okay, a couple more things to add. The 8 days in between Harris's visit to the 8th state and her predicted crash on February 10th is also 4 plus 4 days, which hints at 44. February 10th will be exactly 2 times 3 years after an Israeli F-16, which hints at 4 times 4, fighter jet was shot down. Thus, the 4 plus 4 days pairs with the 2 times 3 years to confirm the signs and connections. But also, what wasn't known, because this was written on January 31st, is that we had an Iran sign on February 2nd, 4 plus 4 days before February 10th. And again, it was Iran that shot down the fighter jet. The Iran sign was when the U.S. followed up after being hit by the drone. But that's another story, which I'll explain in another video. The 49th Vice President, Kamala Harris is the 49th Vice President, which hints at 7 times 7. Okay, so the 49th, as in 7 times 7, Vice President's 7th visit to South Carolina in Myrtle Beach was for a speech at the 7th Episcopal District at their 31st annual retreat. Isaiah chapter 31, which is hinting at a 3 sets of 7 if you didn't catch that. Isaiah chapter 31, because she visited the 31st annual retreat, begins with, "Woe to those who go down to Egypt." And Harris is predicted to go down in her plane in a crash near Little Egypt. And by the way, she will either start her flight from the 31st state or she will be on her way to the 31st state. I forgot to add that. Additionally, Myrtle Beach was where the spy balloon went down, and the spy balloon pointed to the eclipse that peaked over St. Louis and Little Egypt. Kamala Harris will be in the 4th state 4 days before February 10th. Similar to how she will be in the 8th state 8 days before February 10th. She will be speaking about abortion rights on February 6th, which hints at 2-6 and 26. And 26 is the gematria value for the name Yahweh, the name of God in the Bible. And by the way, of course, the 4th state visit 4 days before February 10th hints at the 44th president, who will become the president again as a result of Kamala Harris's death in a plane crash on February 10th. Believe me, I know far better than you how the prediction made in this video was derived. And more importantly, I know far better than you why the righteous Christian God of the Bible has given me a voice through this prediction. If you are a quote-unquote Christian or Muslim, this prediction was not learned through a demon. Be warned that blaspheming the Holy Spirit is the unforgivable sin. If you are a New Ager or New Spirituality person, this prediction was not learned through somehow tapping into the supposed universal collective consciousness. If you are a conspiracy theorist, this prediction was not learned through figuring out a supposed code that the Illuminati and Satanists are using. This prediction was learned through the Bible and through watching carefully the Lord's prophetic signs, which Jesus commanded all Christians to do. Besides proving that Jesus Christ is the Lord, the reason why God has given me a voice through this prediction is to prove that the controversial things that I am saying in the videos on this channel are the truth. Therefore, a wise person will want to watch all of the videos on this channel. Aliens and UFOs are demons masquerading as aliens and UFOs. Most people's spiritual experiences are demonic deception, especially if they are not a true follower of Christ. God became a man and died a horrible death at the hand of the ruler of this world, Satan, and then defeated death for you, so that you too can overcome death, which is the price that must be paid for sin. It is time to repent, which means to change one's ways and turn to God and become a disciple of Jesus. Please leave a like and upvote the video, and once this prediction has come to pass, share this video with everyone you know, and more, don't stop sharing it everywhere in social media. It is essential that everyone immediately read the homepage of my website, TrumpPrediction.com. If you are watching this on the YouTube platform, please note that not all of the videos are on YouTube. You need to switch to the BitChute.com or the Odyssey.com channel, and do it now in case you aren't able to later.